tours as usual, and it's always really nice to organize Semiosalong because you are usually among friends, and that's really nice. So our first presenter today will be Eleni Alexandri, colleague of mine and well, of us, because today I finally am not alone. I have my good friend Andrew Creighton by my side, and yes, so well, Eleni, she's a PhD student at our department here in Tartu University, and her research covers the field of Eastern Asian forms of art and entertainment, as well as Eastern Asian mythology. And currently, her work is concentrated on Korean popular music, K-pop, and Korean music videos, and their impact on popular culture. And yes, so without further ado, I would give the word to Eleni. So please.
Nice. Hello, everyone.
Oh, just one quick, I'm sorry, but one quick thing. We are recording this session, so if you don't want to appear, let us know, because we will upload it to YouTube. And I just quickly remind you that every presenter will have 45 minutes for presentation, then we will have 15 minutes for questions and answers, and we will have no breaks between the presentations. And at the end, if there are some burning questions that were not answered, we will have some more time for discussion. And that's it. I'm sorry, Eleni. Yes.
Hopefully you can see my screen. And I will start the presentation. I want to start by apologizing for my camera. I have this gaming laptop, so the camera is at the bottom of the screen, so I understand the angle is a little bit weird. And also, I'm really sorry for my slides being too wordy, but I just wanted to grasp the opportunity of participating in this conference, the Semiosalong series, and present you what is going to be the best and biggest amount of my research that I'm hoping to do during my PhD studies. So I had to look a little bit ahead into the future and gather a lot of material that are very fresh and new to me as well. But I will try to explain everything in the best way possible. And let me start by the structure of the presentation. So we're going to talk about what is K-pop, what is myth, what is spectacle, and what are the manifestations of identity we can analyze through K-pop. So let's start with what is K-pop, a little bit of history, Korean history, music history, and K-pop history. Korea has been characterized as the miracle of Han River because Korea was one of the poorest Asian countries, but today is one of the richest countries in the world. And K-pop, as part of Korean wave soft power technique of South Korea, had a huge impact on that success. About history and religion of Korea, Korea had been through a lot of dark periods in its history, starting with 108 BC. We have the Gojoseon, previously the northern part of Korea that was invaded and conquered by the Han Dynasty. So we have the Chinese colonization. Then we had northern nomads, Mongolians and Manchurians who also tried to invade the country. Then there was the start of the Japanese occupation that lasted until the end of the World War II, which led to the division of the nation. Then there was the outbreak of the Korean War, and finally the democratization of South Korea in 1987. And when it comes to religion, we can see, especially from the work of President Kim Dae-jung, who was a winner of Nobel Prize in 2000 for his work on democracy and human rights, that Korea has been hosting a lot of different religions, that they are peacefully coexisting. And through this, the point I would like to make is that Korea in its history has been very multicultural, and lots of different ideologies, religions, cultures have been coexist, and there has been a huge exchange of cultural ideas, of culture in general, of patterns, of music, of everything. So in its core, in its essence, Korea has been always a multicultural environment. When it comes to the history of Korean music, the first encounters with Western music began in 1885, when the American Protestant missionaries made Koreans familiar with foreign hymns and folk songs that set the basis for what now it's called Sangha. And then the next familiarization with the Western music was in 1901, and the implementation of military bands in Korea. Then I'm going to just skip through the decades, and I'm going to tell you that in 1950s, Korea was immensely influenced by American music. And this is because of the USA troops that were positioned in South Korea to defend this part of peninsula during the Civil War. So we had a lot of artists like Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, and other huge stars going to South Korea to entertain and support the troops. And apart from that, there was also the radio station American Forces Korea Network, that was formed in 1957, which also influenced heavily the Korean music of the time. And then during the 60s, the popularity of the band Beatles reached South Korea and gave rise to the first local rock bands. During the 70s, it was the era of the hippies, anti-conformism, and revolutionary youth. And surprisingly, it was the decade which gave birth to the first heavy metal band in Korea, from Lee Solman, who is a very important person, and let's keep that name in our minds. And I will talk about him a little bit more in the next slides. And then in 80s, it was a period of heavy censorship and ballads. So everything that was broadcasted through television or radio was censored, and it had to be very soft and very easy to listen. It should be about love or peace or something very softcore. Nothing about society, nothing about troubles, nothing about the troubles of the youth, nothing political. It was a very restricted time. But I also have to note that apart from influences, Korea has its own national and traditional music, like pansori, arirang, that they are both recognized and protected as cultural heritage by UNESCO, and samul nori, among others. And now we're reaching K-pop as part of Hallyu. Hallyu is the Korean wave, and Korean wave doesn't include only K-pop music, but also includes K-pop series, K-pop dramas, films, e-governance, video games, beauty products and cosmetics, food, everything that can be exported as part of Korean culture is part of Hallyu. And Hallyu began for three main reasons. So the first one, most important one, even though it's the second bubble, is the Asian financial crisis of 1997. So because, as we saw in the previous slide, Korea, South Korea had been through very dark periods. They could not stand another financial crisis because it would be the final blow for not only the economy, but the country as well. They could not survive something like that. So they had to come up with a solution to get money, to grow their economy. And the idea happened to be to export culture, to come up with something that they can produce at the beginning with a low budget and bring some money back to their economy. And to this idea, this project, Lee Solman, the guy that I was telling you before that he was the person who created the first heavy metal band, was a huge part of Hallyu, and he is being characterized as the president of culture or the father of Korean wave. Because when he created this heavy metal band, he was heavily censored. He was almost threatened to stop creating this kind of music. So he just escaped the country. He left. He went to America to study, and he was there to witness the birth of MTV. So witnessing MTV and these fast-paced montage, music videos, the aesthetics, he knew that this is something very important and very valuable that he could bring back home, implement it with traditional national elements, and produce something unique and amazing and fresh. So luckily for him, he returned to Korea just by the time of the democratization. So he could actually give birth to his project, and it was the perfect, let's say, even though financial crisis was a sad event, it was the perfect opportunity for him to do so. And in collaboration with government, the Hallyu and most importantly K-pop started. But another very important incident for the creation of K-pop was the appearance of Seo Taiji and Boys in 1992 in MBC show television. It was something like a talent show. And it was the first time that Korean people would witness something like this. The boys were dressed in hip hop clothes, and they were rapping, and they were singing this song called I Don't Know, that was a very social and political song. And it was touching upon issues that they shouldn't be touched upon usually. So it shocked people. But most importantly, all this was were merged and intertwined with a very weird for them aesthetic, because they were dancing synchronically and they would resemble boy bands of US like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. So this marriage of these two completely contradicting elements was something very shocking, that for the committee of the show, it was not something successful. Actually, they managed to get the lowest rankings in the history of the show, but their appearance was enough to shock the audience and to give them hope that something new is coming in the music industry, something fresh, something that maybe represents them better than what they have already. So now we explained a few things about K-pop and Korea and Korean society and history, and we explained how this society and this culture has always been multicultural, and this is an element that existed always there. Let's move to what is myth and how we can characterize K-pop as a myth. So myth usually is associated with stories about gods and heroes, and it comes from the Greek word mythos, that it's exactly this, like epic grand stories about these kind of characters. But now in modern times, we tend to use this term a little bit broader, and especially in consumerism times and societies, it takes upon also a connotation of a brand myth. But also the expansion of the term has been so broad that right now everything, famous photographs, films, songs, pop culture events or incidents, anything that has been epic enough in a way that everyone knows about it, so it has created a myth of its own, can be characterized a myth because it's something everyone knows, it's something big, it's something huge, and it has a very specific character that stood out. So in that way, we can characterize things of pop culture as some myth, not mythical, but myth. And we can talk about the mythology of K-pop or these kind of things. So let's move to what is spectacle. Everything that was directly lived is now merely represented in the distance. So this quotation here comes from Douglas Kellner, and I could not have phrased it in a better way, so I'm just going to stick to that. Why do we study spectacles? We study spectacles because they provide a fertile ground for interpreting and understanding contemporary culture and society, because the majority of spectacles provide articulations of silent hopes and fears, fantasies and obsessions, and experiences of the present. Media spectacles also put on display the politics of representation and the current problematics of gender, race, and class. So it's like a mirror of our society, and studying spectacles, we can understand better ourselves in a way. So the Society of the Spectacle started with Debord, and he gave lots of different definitions of the term, and he also was occupied with how the spectacles are motivated and driven by capitalistic motives and consumerism, and he was very aphoristic when he was talking about spectacles. However, we can look beyond this aphorism and stick to what he was trying to describe, which is something very important and very interesting, because he's painting this picture of this reality that it's not exactly real. It's a depiction of our reality, somehow distorted, like a mirror of what we're living, and something we can only see, but we cannot come close, we cannot actually experience. So you can see different definitions, and I've highlighted the things that I think are more important. So whatever appears in a spectacle, whatever appears in a medium is good, because since it appears, it has to be good. And the audience believes that. The audience believes and trusts the spectacles. And spectacles can be anything from news, propaganda, advertising, entertainment, and it represents the dominant model of life. So through spectacles, the boundaries between true and false, reality and fiction are getting very blurry. And the sad reality is that in spectacles, even the deceivers are being deceived. No one can escape this black hole, this void. And the spectacle is creating this never-ending monologue and self-praise. So is very self-absorbed and self-contained, and spectacle talks about spectacles. Spectacle creates content for the sake of spectacle. So it's really like a void that draws you in. And more specifically, I would like to point out some things Debord was saying about spectacles, stars, and time. And by saying stars, I don't mean constellations, I mean celebrities. So when it comes to celebrities, they present the model individual, who you want to be, who you should be, who you aspire to be. But the truth is that they are the opposite of an individual, because their individuality is as bad for them as it is for the viewer, because it's going to destroy this illusion. They should not be unique individuals. They should be these perfect human beings that they don't have the right to do anything wrong, and they create this model of success that you have to follow as a viewer. And most importantly, they should do it forever, continuously, and without living their own reality. So when it comes to domination, what is important here and what it correlates with Korea, because everything I'm trying to point out will lead to the analysis of K-pop as a spectacle and the issues it forms to identity. So the country, the hegemonical discourse that is dominating other regions, other countries, other societies, irrespective, doesn't have to be a rich country, a rich discourse. It doesn't have to have the resources or the power. The power of the spectacle is enough, because the spectacle is available to everyone. So you can achieve domination through the spectacle. And lastly, about time, the board said something very, very interesting about the pseudo-cyclical time. And the more the audience consume commodities in this pseudo-cyclical time, which can also be characterized as spectacular time, the time breaks. It's not linear anymore. We don't have the continuum, because the audience, the viewer, is getting absorbed in this void that I was trying to describe, and he's just absorbing information and images, and he's living, instead of living and experiencing his own life, he is experiencing the spectacle. So time there is different, space there is different. And it creates, as we can see, a false consciousness of time. And now let's move on to what is identity. First of all, it was important for me to make the distinction of what is personality and what is identity, because going there, it was my first question. How is this a part, or is it one part of the other? So when it comes to personality, it's patterns of behavior, and it is not something rigid, and it's not something stable. Identity, it's not something stable either, but let's focus on personality right now. It can be studied and analyzed by tools such as questionnaires of 5 personality traits, as you can see here. So the individual can answer these questions, but for the researcher to build the personality profile of someone, this questionnaire can be given also to your mom, your dad, your friends, your sister, your cousin, and they also can answer for you to describe and paint the picture of what is your personality. So it is not a personal concept, ironically. And 2 or more people can have the same personality traits. They can have exactly the same personality traits. But when it comes to identity, identity is everything that makes you yourself and what makes you unique. It includes a personal notion of identity, which means that you should define what is identity and what it means for you to be yourself and how this makes sense inside of you. One can be affected by other people's understanding, but the analyst or the researcher will not ask anyone else what is your identity, because no one knows what is your identity. You can be affected by what other people believe about yourself, but you are doing this to yourself. You're altering your identity based on their critiques or their comments. It's not something collective. It is your personal own idea of what it means to be you. And it can be studied only by open-ended questions, because you have to explain the things that led you to be the person who you are today. And it's not simple yes or no questions and answers. And finally, 2 people cannot have the same identity. So identity is constructed through opposition, and it's the very famous polarity, you versus them, or him or she, or we and the others, the outsiders, the insiders. And identification, actually, it turns out to be the very least well understood concept, along with identity itself. And identification is never completed. That's why I said before that personality might not be rigid and stable, but also identity it's not. But identity it's not, because it's always developing, it's always improving. Through the journey of discovering yourself, you change yourself, you change your identity, you adapt your identity. And identities are about questions of using the resources of history, language, and culture. And the question becomes not exactly who I am, but who I want to be, or who I'm becoming. And it's only through this polarity and this juxtaposition, I'm sorry for my English, that you can understand yourself and construct and constitute your identity. And a very fitting quote that I would like to point out is from Simon Freed, that said that identity is not a thing, but a process, an experiential process, which is most vividly grasped as music. Very fitting. So, a little bit more specifically now, let's talk about national identity and K-pop. National identity versus cultural identity. K-pop as a misrepresentation, K-pop as a form of self-description, and K-pop of as part of national identity. So let's again make a distinction between cultural identity and national identity. Cultural identity is a manifestation of social attributes of human beings, is also an important medium affecting the identity of individuals and ethnic groups, and national identity. So cultural identity also affects and impacts national identity. It's within national identity. And on the other hand, national identity refers to the identity of citizens of a country with their own country's historical and cultural traditions, moral values, ideals, beliefs, national sovereignty, and so on. It is manifested as individuals, groups believe that they belong to the country as a political community. So I guess this is pretty much clear. It's a combination of history and culture and values and ideas. So it's things that we already talked about Korea. So how come people are accusing K-pop of misrepresentation? Among other people, John Lee, in his article in 2012, What is the K in K-pop? He stated that K-pop is denuding and destroying whatever existed in South Korean culture and tradition. And there is not very much of Korean in K-pop. That's why it's so successful, and that's why it sells to the customers. And truth to be told, he wrote that in 2012. In 2012, the generation of K-pop, it was the second towards third generation of K-pop that was becoming successful and starting breaking the boundaries of the country and reaching other countries and other continents. So I can say that probably he's right about this specific time period, that yes, by that time K-pop did not exactly was the best representation of what Korea is. And that is because of the meticulous plan of intersexuality implemented by K-pop entertainment industries. Based on my research and the things that I have gathered, I figured out that there are 3 different phases of intersexuality when it comes to K-pop. Firstly, there was the necessity of a common code. So as we can remember from Jacobson model of communication, in order to have a successful communication, you have to have a common code. So the message you're sending can be deciphered and understood by the receiver. And when Korea with K-pop wanted to reach out to a broader audience, global audience, they needed to say something like, hey, we're not that different, we have many things in common. So they implemented many allusions to global and mainly American pop culture through pictorial intertextuality. You can see people wearing t-shirts of Nirvana, or you can see the music videos make intertextual references to famous movies like The Shining or La La Land, The Ghost, and so many others. But there are also there is also the linguistic intertextuality. So in logos and lyrics, when it comes to lyrics, they were trying to implement phrases that they are catchy, usually during the chorus of the song, so they can grasp the attention, they can make the audience sing along while keeping the rest of the song in Korean. And also they would try to find lyrics that meant something or would make the audience recall something, like, I don't know, Hakuna Matata from Lion King. Everyone knows this phrase, or almost everyone knows this phrase. So hearing this in a K-pop song immediately makes a connection. Like, oh, they refer to something I know. And then there was a structural intertextuality of music. At the beginning, there was a huge implementation of music instruments and music influences that were very foreign to Korea. EDM, techno, electro music, things very far away from their traditional music and culture. But that was a necessary path that they had to take in order to build this communication channel. And then there was the time for the second phase of intertextuality. And in this phase, the implementation of Korean traditional elements began. So in pictorial intertextuality, suddenly we see that from 2015, 2016 and on, when K-pop has stabilized and established a certain position in music industry, global music industry and global charts, they started to implement traditional elements like traditional garments, hanbok, or the architectural buildings in their music videos, and slightly start to promote their traditional elements. Also paintings. A whole video could be inspired from a traditional painting. And when it comes to structural intertextuality, we started to have implementation of traditional music. So what I told you before about arirang or pansori, samugnori, these things were implemented within the K-pop songs as background sounds, or you could finally hear some traditional instruments playing and being perfectly implemented in the music. And here there is a quote that supports pretty much this statement, and saying that in reality, K-pop is an amalgamation of these different genres, that they are being emptied and freed historically and culturally from their original context, and they become a great mix with Korean elements, and then they are presented as something new and fresh and stylistic coherent. So you know that even though there is an intertextual structure there, the end result is something new, fresh, but most importantly, coherent. It has its own aesthetic identity. And nowadays, we have the third phase of intertextuality, because after that success, K-pop is now being an intertextual element. And here in the picture, you can see a League of Legends character. And it's a prominent example of how K-pop is being referred to from other pop culture, I don't know what word I want to use, elements. I'm sorry for that. So yeah, there was a huge campaign with specifically made skins for K-pop lovers that the players of League of Legends could buy to dress their characters as that. And afterwards, there was a music video created from scratch that was presented and performed by a completely virtual and digital group of K-pop idols that were played by the League of Legends characters. So you can see that the myth of K-pop is expanding and it reaches new elements. Okay, I think I'm missing something here. No, I don't. Okay, so we have the self-description and the auto-communication, two notions that are very important in order to reach the final point. So in self-description, we have this dialogue with other cultures that they can say, my culture is different than yours. And in auto-communication, the culture communicates with itself. And the more the text has been interpreted and the more it has been mediated, the more strongly the text is getting tied to the culture. But someone would ask, okay, maybe K-pop has been interpreted a million times and mediated a million times. Why is it tied to Korean culture and not global culture? And here I'm going to say more points to prove what I'm trying to state. Even after the intertextual elements of the second phase with traditional garments and architecture and traditional and national songs, K-pop is part of Hallyu, and synergetically they work in a way to build this national branding and promote the country, and they are succeeding to do so. And K-pop specifically is not stopping at the music videos and songs. We see that boy bands, for example, they're having promotional campaigns and events like this Chuseok photo shoot in 2019, where BTS are posing in front of this traditional building, Korean building, to celebrate Chuseok and promote this mid-autumn festival of Korea to the rest of the world and make us familiar with their tradition. And there has been such a huge growth to income tourism in Korea after the success of K-pop, and so many more people are studying Korean language. So as a representation of what Korea is, actually as a representation, it's bounded to be partial. A representation cannot be the identical same thing. It takes parts of something and represents it in a way. But apart from that, K-pop is actually representing in a successful and coherent way the national identity. And another point I would like to make is that if you remember at the beginning of the presentation, we talked about how Korea was always a multicultural and multi-ethnic and multi-religion society and culture. And actually, in the book Spirit of Korean Development by Ryu, we see success stories of other organizations like Hyundai or Samsung, where the presidents of the company have stated and admitted that at the beginning of building this colossus, they imitated and they studied US and Japan in order to take some elements and mix them together with traditional elements and create something new. So it is this spirit of flexibility, acceptance, and adaptability of Korea that is also an element of Korea pop. So K-pop is a perfect representation of what is the essence of Korea, in my understanding, after my research. And when it comes to self-model, that is a byproduct of self-description, we can see how the identity of aesthetics and the model of success has affected other countries. So now we have boy bands in other countries like China or Kazakhstan that they are built upon the model of success of K-pop. So in the case of China, the boy band here, Wavy, is built from a sub unit of Korean entertainment company, but DNA from Kazakhstan is a Kazakhstani-based group, no connection with Korea. They're just following the steps of K-pop artists. And now let's talk about collective identity. I hope everyone is still here with me here. Collective identity and subcultures identity. K-pop as a translocal subculture. It is translocal because all the people that are part of this subculture are not located in the same geographical area. And this is thanks to the internet and the advance of technology. So characteristics of a subculture are that it should be a culture embedded in a broader culture. And we have that because K-pop is part of pop culture. A collective phenomenon with a collective identity. This is exactly what I'm going to talk about. It is a part of collective actions. Also, I'm going to talk about that in the nearest slides. And they have a material, artifactual, and behavioral markers. This would be K-pop, different boy bands, different artists, different events. So collective identity, excuse me, is formed through framing, perspective, establishing through symbolic interactionism and constructivism. So every individual is affecting the other in a way in order to build a self-confidence and then a collective understanding. And collective identity is rooted in Marxism, Durkheim's collective effervescence, and Weber's group identification. And according to Hodgkinson, there are three important components for any subculture: identity, commitment, and autonomy. So when it comes to collective identity, values, politeness as a direct utterance, we can see, for example, the K-pop boy band of BTS and how they are working for 4 years now with UNICEF in a campaign of called Love Myself, in order to promote this message, this positive message of self-love, self-appreciation, and to increase the self-esteem to the youth. And K-pop idols in that kind of way play the significant role of leaders, because every subculture needs a leader. And usually more than any other occasion, they have this politeness as a direct utterance. So they urge and prompt their fan bases to be kind to one another, to be kind even to the haters, and to be social and political activists. And there has been many times that the loyal fan base of K-pop boy bands and K-pop idols united in order to make a collective action. And I have included here few of recent events, how they, the fans of K-pop grouped together in order to protest against racism, and how they became a political force to reckon with, and how they also took part in the social open dialogue of Black Lives Matters, and try to actually take a stance in this issue. And this is exactly the characteristics of a subculture. However, an important thing that we can maybe analyze from understanding K-pop as a subculture is how this subculture can be marginalized. And after the recent events with Chinese censorship of forms of entertainment and the very brutal and perhaps not so political correct statements of the, the Communist Party of China, we saw how this subculture can be treated with stereotypes, and what is the understanding of another country of the social identity of agents. So apparently there is no so much free space and freedom of speech when it comes to gender fluidity or LGBTQ rights, or the understanding of the male identity and how a male should function in the Chinese society, something that contradicts 100% with the spectacle of K-pop and the modern entertainment that they want to ban so urgently. And the statement that they are severely polluting the social atmosphere is a strong statement that shows and paints the picture of how the hegemonical discourse in China, or the people who are creating the ideologies and have the power to do so, are understanding the social roles and social identities of individuals.
Eleni, if you could wrap it up, because you're a little bit over time. Well, I mean, you have like some 5 minutes.
Okay, I will try to do that.
Okay.
So we have then the personal and the social identity. And I'm not going to bore you with the differentiations. Is basically the biggest one is that social identity is something that it's independent of your personal efforts. So you have no choice over that. And then I was going to talk about a very interesting article that I really urge you to read, From Pilgrim to Tourist, and the journey of the postmodern individual to find identity, and how it makes a perfect connection and a perfect sense with the identity of the individual when it comes to music and personal identity as impacted and affected by the music and his or her interests. But I will continue. I'm really sorry. Then the mystic and religious aspect of performance, basically based on the romantic tradition, we tend to see performers and artists are something sacred, and the performance as something holy. And we create this distance again between us and them, and it makes the whole experience something almost religious. And this is exactly what the music industry wants to succeed, and they're aiming at maintaining this distance, but also to give us a little bit hope that we can actually reach the audience. So they want to give you hope that you can break the illusion of the spectacle and actually touch, not only see. That's why they're trying to build this balance between sacral and carnal, and turn the audience from tourists who travel around the music industries and different genres to pilgrims, and to consume commodities in what we told before that it was a spectacular time. And this has a huge impact on personal identity, especially in extreme cases that it can develop parasocial behavior or even illusionary hedonism. And this transmedial nature of K-pop industry and how they are distributing this different content in context in different platforms, and how they make you more and more immersed, and how they are promoting this parasocial behavior is what impacts the individual's identity. And there has been very weird and almost creepy examples of how this can go out of hand. And apart from fan fiction that can get very crazy, we have this Midol app that you can pretend to talk with your favorite artist, which is a bot, or you can either pretend to be an artist and talk to another individual making this deal that you're both pretending and role playing, and you can actually have video calls. I don't know how. And then we have this example of identity crisis by Ollie London. You can search about it. It's certainly interesting. And when it comes to the personal identity of the idol, the thing is that they are treated as commodities and they are treated almost as empty signifiers, that the fans are trying to fill the void of their unarticulated and unsatisfied needs, and they are losing their identity because it's an issue for them as well. And they are getting more empty from what they were usually, what they were once. And the other issue when it comes to identity of idols is identity silence. So in some kind of way and in some sense, they do evoke these personas in Jungian terms, and because they get the pleasure of satisfying the people, and it's something that happens most of the cases unconsciously. So in conclusion, K-pop is a very rich semiotic topic that allows the analyst to touch upon various socio-political and cultural aspects. The power of spectacles and identity and the boundaries between reality and fiction are purely semiotic topics. And there should not be any aphorism, but neither support of K-pop when we're doing a research. But the results, as we saw in the previous slide of Kellner's approach of why we study spectacles, could be a very nice reflection of our society, and it can contribute to our field of study. And these are my references. Therefore, wait for it. Okay, thank you so much for your attention. I'm really sorry I went over time. I have some confetti for you, yay! And feel free to ask me any questions. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And so now we have some time for questions. I would ask you to keep it as brief as possible, so we don't run into Shikufre's time. But yes.
Hi, thank you so much, Eleni, for your talk. It was really interesting, and I'm sorry you had to finish in the very most interesting part of that. But I wanted to ask you about the intertextuality part. It was great. I really liked how you related the intertextuality at the beginning of the movement and like the status now. It sounds to me as some kind of recursivity, intertextuality, or fractal, because there is the intertextuality at the beginning from other cultures, from American culture, and now it's turned vice versa. So that's a very interesting point about that. But I wanted to ask you, why do you call it structural intertextuality when it comes to music? It's just a terminological question.
It's actually Platt's terminology.
Okay.
You can find it in the references, or I can probably send you something in the chat after I finish answering questions.
Thanks.
No worries. And thank you for your kind words.
Very good. And yeah, I'm sorry we had to stop because indeed it was a very, very interesting part which you were presenting.
No, it's my fault. I got carried away. I'm sorry.
No, but yes. Any more questions? Maybe from here.
I liked yes, yeah, at the very end when you started speeding up, I saw some material on the slides I really would have liked to hear more about. Like, I really liked your little diagram about the empty signifier. Is that your own design?
I can share my screen again really quickly.
Sure.
Okay, so
It-
doesn't move.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
passed it there.
Yeah, that's a nice little diagram. Did you design it yourself? That was what I meant.
No.
Oh. Well, it's still lovely and nice dispersal of like politically inflected sources. I wonder if you turn the critique of consumerism against K-pop at any point in your research.
I think maybe it was not very evident from my slides, but I'm trying to keep a balance. So I'm not trying to be aphoristic. I'm not trying to state that we all know it's a business, and the obvious and easy answer would be that it's business. That's why they're doing everything. They are going for the money. They are being capitalists, and they are aiming at consumerism. But we know that already. I'm trying to put more emphasis on the mechanisms and the meanings behind that, and through the immersion, the participation of the audience, and the different interpretations, to understand more things about the society collectively, not only the producers and the makers of K-pop industry.
Yeah, that makes sense. Excellent presentation, though. Thank you. Thank you again.
So, okay, well, if we don't have any more questions.
May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
So I've been wondering, like, yes, thank you for the presentation. I've been wondering about Eleni's opinion on what lies ahead of this K-pop industry, and specifically like the Korean identity in this regard. Like, what do you think is like awaits like the country next?
I think that since they have established this aesthetic identity, and they are successfully promoting their country, and they are building the national brand, I guess that they would try to establish their position even stronger, maybe appeal to more audiences, because now they have the American continent, but not the European continent in its totality. And just grow bigger and try to then probably sell this model of success to other countries, as it has been, as it has started already with China and Kazakhstan. So I think it's going, maybe it can become the next Hollywood when it comes to music. I don't know. It has the possibility and the potential to get tremendously big, but no one knows.
Very good. Thank you. So then I will just ask a very short question. This distinction that you made between identity and personality, would it correspond in some sense to like a type token distinction? Would you agree? Because to me, it seemed that it might, but I don't know. So I would say that identity, in the way you define it, would be like a token, and personality as type. But I don't know if maybe I'm missing or misinterpreting something.
Very quickly, I will have to say that I see your point, and I would probably say yes, but I think I have to think more about it, because I can think some issues that it can be a little bit contradicting to say that.
Yeah. Okay. So we have one more question, and this will be the last one we will take. Armando.
Hello, good morning from Mexico, and good day for you all, wherever you are. And I was thinking about many things with this presentation. I think it's very good. And well, I want to make this question. When you talked about the social self and the personal self, I started thinking about if K-pop is really a spectacle, or is it a strategy for shaping a social self? Let's say a trans-frontier social self, you know, because I can see that there is a semiosphere and that the customer segment that the K-pop is trying to reach is really well defined, is through rejectfulness of reality, you know, and they don't accept reality and they build another one, an artificial one. For me, an ugly one, but well, there are many opinions. So what do you think about considering this instead of a spectacle, a political regime, you know, through spectacle? What do you think about it? What have you seen about it? I mean, I'm really strange to this culture because I'm from another time. I'm from 1984. So I
I'm
grew up
1991.
so I grew up listening to very strange music, and I'm a, let's say, artist who promotes underground culture to make appear the personal self in my, let's say, college, you know? So my
I
question was
understand.
about a political regime through a spectacle, right?
Yes, to answer quickly, so I don't like disturb people more. I don't think there is any, at least very obvious or very visible political agenda, and I think from the beginning of your question that you said maybe it's just a model of social, how to shape a social identity. It's exactly that. And that is why we call it a spectacle, because in the board's kind of understanding, you have this fake society, this illusionary upside down world that creates these models of how an individual should be and how society should be and how consumers should act or react. So of course, yeah, the spectacle is the one that is promoting ideal for the spectacle itself, social identity and social understanding of the self. So yeah, that's my quick answer. I'm sorry, Israel, don't hate me.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you, and yeah, no worry, everything is well. But so now